was sitting at this little circular table in your office,
Uh-huh.
and we we were going through it, and I said something like, "I'm so new here, I don't know everything that you guys are talking about." And the thing that sticks out to me, and I don't know if this is like, I mean, I think this is a backhanded compliment because Chris just looked at you and was just like, "Look at Josh. He doesn't know everything, but he gets by."
Yeah.
And like the comfort between you that you guys, because we all kind of chuckled, and
Yeah.
but I could tell that there was like a bond between you guys and that you guys were going to be successful.
Thanks, man. I tell people like one of my gifts is that I don't remember many things. I think about that with this work, right? Coming at it with a new perspective on a regular basis, I think helps a lot because we can all get stuck in our ways. That business, I think, was definitely successful because we were naive and ambitious, right? We didn't know how to scale a business and we didn't know the right ways to do that. In those kind of cases, I think of the importance of not knowing everything and embracing that as embark on something.
I think that's the nail on the head, right? It's so important to understand that you don't know everything,
Yeah.
but the things that are going to get you by are working hard and a willingness to learn. On our website, I think one of the things we talk about is that we want to learn because we recognize that we don't know everything. I think we
Yeah.
know a lot. We don't know everything, and people are going to know things that or have done things that we haven't done. And so,
Right.
especially with some of the new things that we've gone through and in terms of our strategy shifted over the last 4 years, but really last 12 months, I mean, we know we don't know everything, but I think we're willing to learn. And we're putting in the time and effort to learn and make the best decisions we can.
Yeah. If you ever think that you do know, then you lose the curiosity and the ability to, I think, evolve and innovate and grow. I don't even know how you got started at Hilton and in revenue management or how you got into this business in the first place.
Yeah, I was working at a nonprofit actually at the time, as an educational nonprofit, and just it wasn't. It had evolved into something that I hadn't really anticipated.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't something I spent happy spending my time on anymore. And so, yes, I was like, give me your resume, I'll throw it in. And I was also interviewing at a couple other places, and had final rounds of Hilton and another company. I knew a couple of people at this other company, and they were all analysts and they didn't seem to really enjoy what they were doing. Where so I was like, yeah,
Mm.
this is great down here. It's chill. So it's like, all right, one person's happy, a couple of people are unhappy. Let me pursue this option. And then I landed in a really good situation. If you look at like my leadership team for when I came in at Hilton, there's
Yeah.
Patrick Boucher and Maisa
Mm-hmm.
and John Pelican. And
Mm-hmm.
so that was a really great support structure that I had.
Yeah.
And so I fell into a pretty good situation. It was, I mean, honestly, like those years in the early 2010s were
Mm-hmm.
a lot of fun. I mean, I grew up in the Midwest. I grew up in Michigan. I went to school 25 miles from where I grew up, and I had never really left. I
Mm.
just moved to Texas, and
Yeah.
it was a big jump.
Mm.
But it was pretty cool the way that Hilton was structured. I mean, like we had 22 analysts that started around the same time, and you kind of bond with those individuals, and the department is really, I mean, you have to do work, right?
Yeah.
But there's so much support around it. It felt just a good place to grow. And I never really thought about hotels before. I mean, I got the business side of them, but I never thought about hotels as like an industry before,
Yeah.
and thought it was super fascinating. And eventually, some of the stuff I was doing at Hilton over the next couple of years were pretty pretty cool, and like got to travel a little bit and got some cool opportunities to meet with different folks from different cities, different regions, and yeah, it was. I mean, it was a really good place to start your learning career.
Yeah. And how did you and Sagar know each other for him to refer you there and working with him now?
Now we're business partners, so him and I
Yeah.
have like always kind of been. My mom tells me I owe Sagar a lot, man. But Sa- Sagar and I met in undergrad, so we met at the University of Michigan, and just have always been really close friends. His sister's one of my best friends, and we met through her actually. So he's always been somebody who I thought is one of the more reliable people throughout my life.
Yeah. Wow. I love that. I love that you guys are back together too, working together like that. You said that you find the hotel industry so fascinating. What about this business is so interesting to you?
Do you remember that we used to do lunch and learns?
Yeah.
So I think my fascination really kicked off at lunch and learn. I actually went to those things, which were really cool. Not a lot of people went, and so we would bring in. Sometimes there's people within our department specifically, but we would
Yep.
also get people from other departments or other roles. And there was one where we had a bunch of regional developers come in for Hilton, and they were talking about site selection and how they work with different ownership groups to figure out new locations. And there was a huge push for the Home 2 brand at that point that had, I think, launched around 2013 or 14. That whole like lunch and learn on the development side was what was fascinating to me, and it eventually what led me to make the move that I made away from Hilton
Mm.
because of that. So I think I've
Meaning like
always
you
kind of,
wanted to get into the development space.
yeah, I'm really interested in history, and a lot of that is tied to architecture. And I think maybe controversial, but Boston's one of my favorite cities because of some of the stuff that still exists from Revolutionary America over there. You have
Yeah.
the courthouse where some of those early documents were signed and the Declaration of Independence was signed there. I got to travel a little bit internationally and to see the architectural styles of Spain or even going to like the Middle East and seeing some of the stuff there. I have always just been fascinated by architecture. And so
Yeah.
when this development conversation happened, I was like, oh, like I never thought about contributing to all of the various things that go into actually building something. And that I think was a really interesting launching move.
Yeah. Have you done any sort of deals with adaptive reuse or like buildings with historical significance?
We have, and we're working on one right now in downtown Cleveland. We have that's our first. Actually, we did one. We've done one in Dayton, Ohio. We're working one in downtown
What
Cleveland.
was the, tell me about one of them.
So Dayton, I think, is fully publicized at this point, but
Mm-hmm.
it's the old arcade building in downtown Dayton, and we're one of many groups that have contributed to this, and Saga's really been the lead on it from our side. But essentially, it's an adaptive reuse of this arcade building where there's going to be multiple uses that go in. From there'll be different retail users, and then our contribution is we're working on a hotel portion there.
Nice. Wow. Okay. It sounds like that part is touching on a passion for you. What was that like to get to be a part of restoring something with historical significance?
Yeah, I mean, I think that those kind of projects are just fascinating. Even if you look at some of
Mm.
the stuff that we've done where we've taken a piece of dirt and we put a five-story building on it.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's even if it's not historical, I mean that building's gonna be around like 60 years at least, and it's
Yeah.
gonna go through probably different ownership plans and whatnot, and just building things like that are so tangible. I think
Yeah.
it's fascinating to be able to
Mm-hmm.
contribute. There's so much
Yeah.
that goes into that, right? Like
Yeah.
you have to get the land under contract. You have to work with the local municipality. If there are zoning restrictions or variances that you need to get adjusted, you have to go through a process with the local municipality for that. And you have to get architectural and design engaged, civil engineering, and just coordinating all of these things. I mean, there's a decent amount of work that goes into it, but then you end
Yeah.
up with a place where you're creating employment and you're servicing guests.
Yeah. Okay, can we unpack this? Because I'm curious about order of operations, right? Do you find a piece of land first and then think, oh, I want to buy this? Do I buy the land and then go get the zoning? Or do I need to like get something locked up about the land so that I can find out if I'll be able to get what I need to build what I need? When do I engage the brand? All of that kind of stuff.
The easiest answer is yes.
Okay.
Like you do all of that. And so what we've typically done, by no means would I say it's like the
Mm-hmm.
only way to do things, but we'll try to
Yeah.
put something under control, right? So we'll get a purchase and sale agreement, and simultaneously to negotiating that, we are looking at there's current zoning that's in the area.
Okay.
If it's already zoned for the use that we want, great. That's a huge
Right.
hurdle.
Right.
But if it's not, even before we put something under contract, we're having preliminary conversations
Mm-hmm.
with the right people to figure out if the municipality is open to adjusting that zoning. Because you may
Mm-hmm.
have something that's zoned for residential, like commercial residential, like an apartment building, and you may want to put a hotel there. It might be a non-starter for the municipality then, so you wouldn't necessarily try to fight a battle that you've already been told, okay, we're not making this adjustment.
What zoning would a hotel typically fall under?
There's a hospitality zoning for
For
every
most
single city.
municipalities, it's like a
Yeah.
hotel zoning kind of thing. Okay.
Yeah. So you want it to
Uh-huh.
be commercial versus residential, and then within
Right.
commercial, there's a subset of different uses.
Mm-hmm. And could some be zoned a hotel but not sale of alcohol or something like that? So you've kind of
Mhm.
got to figure out a few things, right, with zoning, depending on
Yeah.
what you're trying to build there, I guess.
Yeah. One of our locations, it's a brand standard to have beer and wine, but we don't have the ability to get a liquor license at that location. You've kind of got to go through the candidates, and then we have to request a waiver from the brand. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, there's
Okay.
pretty much anything you can think of.
Yeah. Have you handled where you've personally picked this is where I want to build something and taken it kind of all the way through the process?
Our team has, and so
Yeah.
we've done since I started in 2014. We've probably opened like at least 12 properties that were all
Wow.
ground up construction.
Oh, wow.
Um,
Uh-huh.
so yeah, we've done a lot, and I've been plugged in various flanks, and
That's awesome.
it's pretty fun. It's
Yeah.
stressful at times.
Yeah, right. And there's so many variables. I would assume, right, that you've got so many things that are fluctuating and evolving from construction cost to, like you're saying, zoning. I would assume sometimes the community may say they don't like what's happening or
Oh
there's
yeah,
something else going on.
yeah. You have all that. You also have site conditions, where we had one project where we had to do a lot more remediation than we thought to make the ground stable enough for the size of building that we were looking for.
Okay.
It's really stability. It's about making the ground stable. So it was on a
Uh-huh.
pretty severe slope, and so you have to really even the grade, and it's really about the soil
Uh-huh.
when you're trying to do something like that.
Yeah.
Um, I'm not aware of the technical details.
Sure.
I'm working on the
Yeah.
financial modeling and the debt, and the numbers
Right.
just
You're
kept
like,
coming
oh,
back
we've got to
high.
spend another,
Yeah, and so
yeah, uh-huh.
it was just we had previously we had our own construction company before the pandemic, and
What do you mean you had your own construction company?
witness construction separate division.
Oh, wow. Okay. I
Yeah, so
didn't,
we built
uh-huh.
most of our own projects up until around 2021. And Sachin, our partner who runs construction, he was just trying to wind down a little bit. And so he's still involved, but we'll
Mm-hmm.
outsource like the work,
Like the
and he kind of
GC.
serves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so he serves as like the owner's rep. Him and his team are still involved. We're not the GC anymore.
Yeah, wow. That's
Yeah,
amazing. Okay.
there's been a lot of things that you encounter, and even now today, my role is predominantly on the acquisition side, which does
Yeah.
take out a lot of headaches.
Yeah.
But even through a transaction, you have multiple things that'll come up that it will navigate, and so you
Yeah.
kind of say something's gonna be a hiccup, and it's never really the same thing every time.
Yeah.
And our role is navigating through whatever
Yeah.
challenges that we're experiencing.
Yeah. Okay, so I have so many questions about this. One is I when I was talking to Sagar, he said that he mentions a capital stack a lot of times when I'm talking to him, and I'm just
Yeah.
curious. What can you explain to me? Because I'm embarrassed to ask him. What talk to me about what is the capital stack? What goes into that? Why does it matter?
The most
Uh,
basic that you'll be able to think of
mm-hmm.
is a senior position of debt and equity.
Mm-hmm.
Those two components will be your total cost on a
Mm-hmm.
development or an acquisition. I think you can get a lot more nuance in the capital stack,
Mm-hmm.
and your goal is going to be to either probably reduce equity is your major goal, but you might also have a constraint from your senior lender, from your primary debt position, where maybe you're trying to get to 80% leverage and they can only get to 60 and you can only put in 20. And so you need to solve for a 20% gap. And so you have to get creative on what other solutions you can bring
Yeah.
into the cap stack.
Okay.
So
Okay.
we just closed on an acquisition last week
Okay.
and it was a very basic capital stack. We had a senior lender come in. They
Mm-hmm.
had no participants. Like it was just the lender. They funded 70% of the total cost.
And when you
And
say
then we,
lender, is this like a traditional bank or is
yeah,
this okay?
somebody who runs the commercial
Commercial bank.
space. No different than you going to get a loan for a home that you're looking at buying.
Yeah.
The constraint is like when you go buy a home with a traditional mortgage, you're putting down 20% equity and 80. We in today's environment are for hospitality probably maximum proceeds we're getting from the lender is probably 70%. And then we'll come in with 30% of the equity. So
Right.
that was the capital stack for this deal that we closed last week. Very basic. For something like that Dayton project, the deal has an equity position. There's a lender. There's public funding that's coming in through different grants. There's a tax incentive. There's potentially, I don't quote me, but there's something called PACE financing as well. We've actually used PACE in a couple of our loans where it's an energy efficiency assessment
Mm-hmm.
and that can generate proceeds. And so it's really good for shrinking the lender's position. So you may have your senior lender at maybe 60%, you have 20% worth of PACE financing and a 20% equity position. So the
Mm-hmm.
capital stack is essentially what you're trying to solve for is the total cost. It's going to require some sort of equity position. It's going to require some sort of debt position. And if you can bring in other dollars to help facilitate, you can do so. If you reduce your equity position or if you can reduce your lender's position with something that has a cheaper cost associated with it, then you're
Yeah.
in a pretty good position.
Could you explain in simple terms like the cost of financing? I would assume
Mm-hmm.
one is I have this much money cash and I have this ability to borrow this much. And there's a question of like efficient use of those dollars. So, how are you measuring that? What are some kind of like metrics or measurements that you're taking a look at of how much we would want to put in and how much we would want to borrow here?
The constraint is really going to be from the lender, right? To a certain extent, and then the biggest variable you're trying to consider is the cost of the capital stack. So for your
Mm-hmm.
equity, you're probably trying to deliver some sort of return to your investors, right? You want
Yeah.
them to make money so that they're happy with you. Generally, they're probably looking for a return that is greater than the cost of the loan. So
Mm-hmm.
if you have loan proceeds, you want to bring that in. So it's a cheaper cost of capital than your equity.
Mm-hmm.
If you so we also like I mentioned we layered in PACE financing on a handful of our deals. That generally is a cheaper cost than your senior lender. And so you'll try to maximize your PACE proceeds so you can minimize the
And
lender or
PACE is like
maybe
also a loan as well. It's not just a grant.
it's classified as an assessment, but it functions like a loan. Yeah.
Okay.
And you need a lender to be okay with PACE sitting in the second position. And more
Okay.
lenders over the last 5, 7 years have gotten comfortable with the PACE position
Meaning
on
if
the
the building were to like foreclose, PACE gets paid back before the loan.
lender gets paid back, then PACE.
Oh, okay.
But
Lender is
you
first position, PACE is second, and
mhm.
then the investors are third.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so even in this environment right now with interest rates the way they are, like you would still want to like take out 70% debt on a property?
Probably, yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is really tough to get a transaction completed today, but
What
these aren't
makes it
really
tough? What do you mean?
lending. Cost of lending is the
Yeah.
constraint right now. So which you just kind
Uh-huh.
of alluded to.
So what
But
you're saying is like the math a lot of times just doesn't work then, right? Here's what we can get from the deal. Here's how much money we need to bring in terms of equity. Here's what we would finance. But if we put all that together, what we're going to get as a return just the math doesn't work because of the
well,
interest rates.
yeah. So let me ask you a question. If you want to invest in a hotel,
Yeah.
if I told you, hey, Josh, you write me a check, I will get you a 4% return. You're not going to be happy. You
Right.
can put your money
Yeah.
into a high yield interest account. You can
Yeah.
make 4.5% today,
Right.
probably,
Right.
so with no risk. Commercial
Right.
investments are they're at risk investments, right? And so
Yeah.
you're going to want to make sure that the return you're getting compensates you for the risk that you're taking. So if
Mm-hmm.
I'm giving you a net return that's like very similar to what you can get in a high yield savings account, you're probably, I would advise you to that person, right?
Yeah.
So borrowing cost impacts your net cash flow. That's the money that you get
Uh-huh.
after your operating expenses, after your debt payment, after any reserves that you have to keep. That is what you're left to distribute to investors. And if that return is annualized 4 to 6%, you're probably not getting a lot of investors.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what the constraint is right now. So borrowing
Mm-hmm.
costs have, I'm not going to use 2021 or 2022 because that was a
Yeah.
very unique debt environment. But
Yeah.
if you compare to 2019, a pretty stable, 2018, 2019, pretty stable times, you're a couple hundred basis points higher from a borrowing cost. And then there's also other requirements that a lender is typically imposing, such as like a deposit account. So a lot of community banks, a lot of regional banks want you to keep money with them on the side for them to facilitate you with loan proceeds, which you've got to fund that money. Yeah, you're going to get 4% on it, but it's still added cash that you got to come up with that ends up diluting your investment more or less. And so
Yeah.
that's what's that's what's making it tricky to get a deal done today.
Got it.
Or you're going with some of these bridge solutions or life companies, people
Yeah.
that'll give you non-recourse debt. I mean, there's no personal liability, but they're going to charge you
Mm.
10.5%. You can get interest only on that, but you're still paying
Yeah.
a very hefty interest payment, and all
Mm-hmm.
of that is impacting the proceeds that you can get out for your investors. So it's hard to make deals, quote unquote, pencil right now.
Yeah. So how are you making deals pencil? It seems like you're still figuring some out.
Yeah, so we are, I think we spent a lot of years building out relationships with different owners, different brokers who work in this space. And we've just been also just fortunate with some of the stuff that's popped up where we've just pursued it aggressively. And so this
Mm.
deal that we closed last week, we got it for a very attractive cost. And we did that because we offered a lot of non-refundable money up front, which is something I definitely do not recommend or want to do very often.
Yeah.
But it gave the seller certainty of execution from our standpoint. We had a hefty sum that we would lose if we walked away from the deal from the minute we signed the deal.
Yeah.
And so they were in a position where they were looking for an exit as opposed to a dollar value, and we were able to kind of take advantage of that money,
Right.
non-refundable day one.
Where they could have gotten maybe a higher offer up front, but with a lot of variables of maybe this will or won't get done depending on how things go through due diligence and whatever else. But there was more belief and trust that it would happen from you. And I think also you and Witness have like really built a reputation of trust, and you've been in the Midwest market specifically. It's clear what your swim lane is and what
Yeah.
you're good at. And I would assume that also helps people be more comfortable to do a deal with you because they know that you know what you're doing.
We also had 6 assets within a 15-mile radius of that
Yeah.
particular acquisition. So
Yeah.
we have presence in that specific
Yeah.
market.
Yeah.
And this is where I think we're probably different than a lot of different groups. We've taken our entire portfolio is recourse debt with community banks, pretty much our entire portfolio.
Mm.
And so we have a lot of lending relationships that are local, but some of these
Mm-hmm.
banks, they won't go beyond the state or the region that they're in. And so we do have a lot of community banks in that region, and
Yeah.
we're pretty confident we can get financing for that type of asset, just given
And
the location.
what do others like? How do others approach that sort of thing? They're not using regional banks because they're trying to go everywhere. That's like part of maybe being your Midwest strategy then.
That's part of it. When
Yeah.
there, but the other part is we offer full recourse on all of our deals. So we have personal liability on
Got
the
it.
entire transaction. Where and this I guess one of the main differences from a residential loan. You have a commercial loan option, which is non-recourse, or multiple commercial loan options that are non-recourse, meaning your asset's at risk, but there's no personal liability beyond the asset.
Yep.
So that type of loan tends to be more expensive for the, again, generally speaking. But there have been vehicles in that non-recourse space that can be competitive from a price standpoint. CMBS is the most common that was utilized previously, and they were able to get really competitive from a rate standpoint. But you had absolutely no flexibility to the loan agreement that you signed. So we tend to have relationships with all of our banks. With our bank, we know them. We get invited to family picnics with some of our lenders, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
there's definitely more of a personal touch, and we also, I think, are pretty proactive. During the pandemic, one of the things that I did every single week, which is a scary time for everybody, right, is no different for us, and we assumed it would be no different for our lenders. And so one of the things that I did every week is I compiled a spreadsheet for every single lender that we had in their portfolio with us, and I would send them our operating stats for that week. And I would compare it to the prior week, and I would show the adjustment, and then I would compare it to the prior month. And we got to a point by June, July, August of 2020, we were seeing pretty large month over month increases, even though the year over year, when they looked at
Yeah.
their P&Ls that they were getting, that were down significantly. We were saying, hey, we're seeing some progress, right? This pandemic is lasting longer than any of us thought. This is more real than any of us thought when we were talking in January and February of that year. But here's the progress that we've made from like the bottom. Like, I
Yeah.
think when I looked at our portfolio in April of 2020, we ran 5% occupancy or something. And so hopefully at that point, the only place you can go is up, but it was important to show that to our lenders. And I think we got a lot of feedback as to how appreciated that was from them.
Yeah.
And so we have those types of relationships with some of these folks and met some of our lenders' families, and we've spent time doing that. And we do have to offer that personal recourse, but we've kind of found it worthwhile because we've gotten more competitive rates. And then when we do go through something like a pandemic, realistically, I think we started chipping our loan covenants for a handful of those banks because we had a 1.25 debt service coverage ratio, which is pretty standard in most loan agreements. They were very flexible with us, and they just waived them. And I'm assuming a lot of banks probably did that throughout the pandemic, but I think we made it easy, made it in a lot of our lenders.
I love that, man. You're thinking about how they feel, and you're also thinking about the relationship and the fact that it's in the community. All of this trust builds and stacks.
I think we're in the hospitality business. Relationships are everything,
That's right.
and
Yeah.
I think that extends to vendors, the lenders,
Yeah.
all the trades that we use. I mean, do we make mistakes? Yeah, absolutely. But that's not our intention, and we work to remedy anything that we've done incorrectly in our part. But
Yeah.
the first thing you see when you go to our website is relationships first, outcomes follow. And I genuinely believe that.
Yeah. That's so good, man. Yeah. So you guys have shifted strategy a little bit. You raised a fund recently. I was talking to Sagar about this a couple weeks ago, and he said, yeah, we set out to raise 15 million and then we accidentally got 20, and it wasn't. I just made it sound like it's so easy to raise a fund. And I think that part of that is his humble nature.
Well, that's also
Yeah,
because he didn't work on it
he didn't do
either. So.
it.
No, I say
Yeah.
that jokingly. I mean, Sagar is a very, and you know him, he's just a
Yeah.
very helpful guy. And when
Yeah.
push comes to shove, he's just going to roll up his seat and get to work. And so I joke, this was something that he definitely helped with. And we definitely did overshoot our target, which is a good problem.
How do you raise a fund? Why and how?
So why was essentially because, like I mentioned, most of our historic portfolio was funded by three families. And
Uh-huh.
when the pandemic hit, these guys are looking at their net worth concentration, and 90% of it was in hospitality
Yeah.
real estate.
Right.
And that's probably not good. You go to any financial advisor, they'd probably tell you that's not good diversification. And so some of this was reallocating those families' capital. And so that's Sagar's family and two of our other partners. And so they needed to kind of readjust their family's strategy to better protect their family, which I think is a very fair consideration. Probably something that they should have done prior to the pandemic, but that reduces our ability to get the volume of deals that we're doing. In 2020, March of 2020, we had 5 deals either in an acquisition or under construction. And I know that's not necessarily a lot, but it is not a little. And so,
Yeah. Right.
and like I said, everybody went through things, and that
So
was
so you're
really
saying like at the worst point in time, you were currently under
very
construction
exposed.
with
Yeah, we're
5
very
different
exposed.
deals.
And so we definitely had to readjust our strategy. Now, having said that, I would say all of us believe in hospitality as a long-term asset. We didn't want to just shut down our operations. Like, all right,
Right.
well, now we don't exist as a hospitality investment company anymore.
Mm.
We still believe in it. And over the years, we've had a lot of folks ask us about investing with us, and we've never really been like we've taken people at 5% here and there, and but we never really engaged fully in that type of sphere. And so what we ended up doing is over a lot of conversations and research, we decided to create a fund, which we brought in expert legal help at Ice Miller to help us facilitate, which, and they've been great for us. But effectively, we have 49 unique investors in this fund. It's a $20 million commitment. So call capital fund. So as we have deal flow, we
Okay.
call the committed amounts. And it's not like these guys just sent us a check and we're
Yeah.
just
Right.
sitting here and trying to buy a private jet with their money or something. We have to show them the deal flow
Right.
and then
Uh-huh.
they'll write the
Okay.
check. And so that was last week was the first deal that we closed with that fund. We have another
Oh,
deal
nice.
lined up that we
Congrats.
just signed. Thank you.
So
And
typically you would put together a proposal and then reach out to all of those 49 and say, "Hey, here's the deal we're working on. Here's what we would expect to see." But in this scenario, having a fund is now easier to then manage these deals in and out. What are some of the other things I'm not understanding there?
so what we did in the past, probably one of the families took the majority position and then maybe, and that was our entire equity. We didn't really
Okay.
go and try to raise money.
Yeah, yeah.
And so now costs have also gone up. Equity checks are a lot larger. And so all of this kind of plays in and diversification for the family. And so all this kind of plays into how do we responsibly stretch not only like our own dollars, but
Mhm.
also take in some of these folks that have asked to invest with us over the years. The fund solution is good because, and I'll just give you a quick example. Like some of my friends are now asking to invest, guys and
Mhm.
gals that have spent years building up some free cash flow.
Yeah.
So if we were working on that deal we closed last week, I would not take their cash
Mm.
and put it into one deal.
Okay.
But I will take
Right.
their cash for the fund because now that fund is going to go into 4, 5, 6 different deals, and
Yeah.
their dollars into every deal is much smaller. And
Mm.
their overall investment is so diversified
Yeah.
that their risk it's a little bit de-risked from that standpoint versus
Mhm.
putting that whole check size into one deal. And so we've
Right.
got probably like of the 49, probably at least 10 or 15 are folks like that I would have recommended to them to not put into one deal. I would
Mhm.
recommend to do something like this where their investment will be allocated throughout a handful of different deals.
Going out to get these 49 people to commit, what was that like for you? What was the pitch?
We have a marketing deck that we put together with some external help, and it highlights what we've done, why we want to do what we're saying. It highlights why we believe in the Midwest. It highlights the type of markets that we want to pursue and the types of assets we want to pursue. And then it obviously goes to a term sheet of what we're willing to offer. And so when you raise a fund, what you'll often find is some sort of structure where the sponsor, which would be us in this case, will put in 10 or 20% position and raise the rest of that fund. And there's something called a promote, where after a specific hurdle, the sponsor, let's say it's a 1090 structure, after some sort of promote, the sponsor will take maybe 30% of the return instead of 10% of the return. And they have a 20% promote there, and that's how they get incentivized. So we didn't put that in there. So everything in our fund is pari passu, which
Mm.
I think inherently makes it rather attractive to what else you'll find out there from an investor standpoint.
Mhm.
But our goal here is to build credibility externally because we've only worked with our own capital. And so we wanted, so I think that's also part of why we raised the money so quickly, is because it is an investor friendly term sheet. It gives us enough money from a fee generation standpoint to keep our overhead and our payroll and operating
Mm-hmm.
expenses and a little bit of profit, but we're not charging a promote, so we're not really getting too aggressive with the offering.
Got it. So is there some sort of management fee?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
because I'm
yeah,
assuming that like you have to make some income to just support the
yeah,
infrastructure. Okay. So,
exactly.
but a promote happens a lot of times in these deals, and you're saying that the sponsor would actually jump 20% in total equity,
Hypothetically, in your return,
like
in the
in the return, but not in equity.
yeah. So if there's like an
Uh
eight
huh.
percent pref, that first 8%, maybe it gets paid per pursue. So the sponsor would get 10%. The LP capital, limited partner
Mm-hmm.
capital, would get 90%. But once an 8%
Mm-hmm.
return is generated, that may shift to a 70-30 structure. So
Mm-hmm.
after you achieve more than an 8% return, the sponsor starts getting 30%, even though
Got
they're
it.
only a 10% position.
Yeah. Right.
So it can be structured in many different
Uh
ways, the
huh.
actual promote,
Yep.
but most real estate funds do have some sort of promote.
And some of that's probably incentive, right? To
It is because you
get
as an investor want me to be focused on finding
on
really good
performance.
deals,
Yeah.
and you do that on back end performance, which is what the promote gives you. And
Yeah.
so I would always, even to my friends, I tell them like, don't go on something that's fee heavy up front.
Yeah.
But if they're incentivized on the back end and you're comfortable, then
Yeah.
that's something that's like worthwhile. A lot of my friends have asked me over the years about different offerings that they're looking at, but yeah, we ended up rolling out a pretty attractive option. I did take a handful of my friends into it as well, so I feel comfortable with that. Whereas I wouldn't take them into one singular deal with
Mm-hmm.
so.
Mm-hmm. And in that, in a fund like this, would you get the value of being the owner of the real estate?
Keep major decision rights in terms of like
Mm-hmm.
financing and disposition.
Mm-hmm.
That sits with us as the sponsor still.
And then like depreciation and all of those types of things will carry
Pair
through to everybody.
pair pursue. Yeah, as long as they qualify for their personal tax returns as active real estate investors, which we don't certify. That's an IRS regulation.
Mm-hmm.
Then, but we offer depreciation accordingly to their investment.
Mm-hmm. Got it.
I actually have to jump,
Yeah.
but
Great. No, this is great, man. Yeah. Thank you for being here.
yeah,
This was so
I'm
good.
happy to do like a follow up if
Yeah,
we
we
still want to
will.
chat
Yeah,
further.
totally. All right, man.
I
Love you,
appreciate
buddy.
you.
Good to see you.
You
Okay.
too, man.
Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.